Good morning. We are here at the site of what can only be described as a devastating fire. This building means a lot to a lot of different people. It's historic, it was beautiful, it was beloved, and I want to commend the heroic efforts of the Albany Fire Department, who arrived on this scene to what was already a fully involved fire. I'm going to have the fire chief speak to the details of fighting the fire, and then we'll move on to a discussion of the status of this building from the standpoint of our codes department and the efforts that we were undertaking to ensure that this building would be revitalized the way that most people in our community wanted to see. But Chief, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. It's Joseph, J-O-S-E-P-H. Last name is Gregory, G-R-E-G-O-R-Y, Chief of Department for the City of Albany Fire Department. So last night we received multiple calls for a fire here on Kenwood Ave. The call came in at 6:26. Our units arrived at 6:33. They found a heavy fire condition throughout the structure. We estimate this structure is about 100,000 square feet total. Fire was throughout. There was, within minutes of our arrival, the steeple collapsed on the building, so that shows you how well involved the fire was at that point. Our firefighters did a phenomenal job in deploying and getting water on the fire. To total, we had 24 units on the scene, 51 members, 51 personnel from the Albany Fire Department were here. There were 0 injuries to firefighters, which is fantastic news for us, and 0 injuries to any civilians that we know of. The fire was placed under control at 10:23. So for the amount of and the volume of fire that we had in this entire structure, that's a phenomenal job by our firefighters. So it took just under 4 hours to get this fire under control and to contain it. So as you can see, we're still operating on the scene. There are still some hidden hot spots underneath some of the debris. So that's the purpose of our presence here. As far as assistance to the scene, we were assisted by the Selkirk Fire Department. We called them for water access. They supplemented our water supply through the Bethlehem water system, so they were able to get us water, get us additional water, I should say. This fire, the volume of fire warranted huge amount of water, so we are appreciative to them. We did have to enact our mutual aid plan for the city. Troy Fire Department responded. Waterville Fire Department and the Waterville Arsenal responded. During the time period that we were here, for the 6 hours plus that we were initially here, the city also responded to, the city companies also responded to in excess of 20 calls for service. So it was a busy night for our Albany firefighters. As far as any operational issues, we talk about water supply. It's just we didn't have any difficulty in obtaining the water. It's just the amount of water that we needed. There was an exceptional amount of hose that we had to lay. There was over 2,000 feet of hose that was laid to get water to this scene. You can see the rough terrain was impeded us a bit, but we were still able to navigate our equipment and get it in there and make a quick operation. Accessibility, we did have some accessibility issues, and to areas in the back of the building also, because we weren't able to get our apparatus to the back of the building. And the wind was a factor in it also. So our main concern was to try and contain the fire, to keep the fire within these structures, and obviously extinguish it, but also prevent it from transmitting to other areas throughout the city. With the wind factor and the embers that were flying, we were able to. We were very lucky and prevented any issues with that. So that's about it from our standpoint. So I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Thanks, Chief. So this building was sold by the order that owned it in 2017 to Kenwood Commons LLC. That transfer happened in August of 2017. There was activity here. The plans with respect to this property, as presented to us by Kenwood Commons LLC, was to create condos, apartments. They talked about an artist space, and they had been moving forward with construction. There was activity that happened here. That was all abandoned, as far as we know, in 2019. And so since that time, this has been a site that has been visited by our codes department. I'm going to have the director of our codes department speak to the history here and what the status of that was. But I will say that as recently as this past March 14th, the city representatives, as well as representatives from the county, met via Zoom with the a company called Guild Investment Group. They represented to us that they held the mortgage. They had purchased the mortgage on this property, and they were interested in knowing and understanding more about what our zoning uses would have permitted, wanted to understand the status of the tax delinquency that was held by the county, and had indicated that they were interested in moving forward and investing in this site. Again, this was just as recently as a week ago, this past Tuesday. So that was the last conversation that we had with respect to the future of this building, and it was one that was directed at getting it out of bankruptcy and making an investment in it. But with respect to some of the codes issues and the challenges that we've had with this building, I'm going to ask our director of building and codes to come up and speak to that. Rick LaJoy.
Good morning. So since the project was abandoned in 2019, this property became a high priority for our department. We wanted to make sure that it was a safe property, that it was secure. It was not only a high priority for myself, but for the mayor. We would make several visits to this property on our own with no calls coming in, just to see that it was secured and boarded up. We were called here over a dozen times for the plywood being removed and people getting into the building and vandalizing and stripping materials. We conducted 2 major board-ups that we had to bring in outside contractors to do so in order to secure the building. And as late as last August, we were here again. The first floor, all the doors had been removed, all the plywood had been removed, and people were stripping more materials and vandalizing and causing a lot of damage to the property. We had the building secured once again. It was a very overgrown, it was in an overgrown state at that point, so you could not even see the building physically till you got to where we're standing here today. So the contractors, for their own safety and for safety of EMS or police and fire, had leveled all the ground behind us with an excavator to make a clear site, so that, again, when we come down here, we are often encountering people walking through the property, walking around the property, and chasing them out of here. So this has been a high priority building for us. This is the kind of tragedy that we're trying to prevent. We had several cases against the owner. We have cases in court against the owner. December was the last case that we started. We wanted an engineer's assessment because the materials that had been removed from the property at the roof line had actually caused some of the parapets to fail and some brick starting to fall. And we had no compliance and no response. So that's where we were. It was constantly on our radar. We were here quite often trying to ensure that something like this would not happen.
So as I said, this is a property that we had hoped would be redeveloped when it was purchased from the entity that owned it. It was owned by the order who had originally built this convent, and as I said, was sold in 2017. I think there was a lot of media coverage about the plans, for this property, and we attempted to work with the developer to ensure that they were able to have a pathway to redevelopment. We had rezoned this area to allow for mixed-use development, and that did not occur. The tax delinquencies, I believe, started almost immediately, but I'm going to turn it over to Dan McCoy. As you know, we worked together with respect to the Central Warehouse very recently, getting that a significant grant and into good hands. I think we've demonstrated that we work together to ensure that properties like this, important properties in our city, get redeveloped. And as I said, as recently as March 14th, we were again working together with a potential developer for this site to ensure that we could do what we could in order to get this redeveloped. But I'm going to turn it over to the county executive, and thank you for your partnership.
No, Mayor, thank you. And 90% of the time things go right in any department. It's at 10%, and then we get the phone calls from the media saying something went wrong. And I do want to say to Mayor Sheehan, thank you for your leadership, because it really is the teams you put together in the city, from the water department to the fire to the police to everyone involved. Thank you, and I really truly mean that. But the reality is this: I do want to thank. We do have a great relationship. We started on a partnership down this piece of property. It was exciting. The two of us were smiling. Our staff had everything put together, and this happens. And to back up, since 2018, I believe, the taxes on this property they owe us is $5.5 million. So we started the procedures to go forward for foreclosure, but they filed bankruptcy, kind of similar to Central Warehouse, not the same, kind of similar, but not the same. But I have to tell you, we had a plan of action for here. As a kid growing up and running this property, seeing this beautiful building behind us, the way it looks today, it's a shame. And I do want to say the mayor had a great plan to keep the architect, to keep it, like she was saying, a lot of residents walk through here. They enjoy it. People run back here. There's a lot of trails back here people don't realize. And to see its state right now, it's a sad moment. But it's sadder that we couldn't come forward with the plan that the mayor put together with her team. So that's all I have. I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. Thank you, Mayor.
So this fire is under investigation, and at this point, we don't have anything to add to that. It is being investigated. We have great partners. Albany Fire Department is taking the lead on this, together with Albany Police Department and the State Fire Investigation. That's our standard operating procedure, particularly with a fire of this magnitude and scope. And so I also do want to state that we're joined by Joe Coffey from our water department. When I spoke yesterday about water issues here, it wasn't water pressure. It was just, you see the remoteness of the site. There was some debris in one of the roadways down to Pearl Street. The length of the hoses, it was a massive fire. So it was just getting the amount of water. But I want to thank the water department again for, they really think and plan for these types of events. And so the water pressure was great. It was just such an involved fire. It was almost, I don't know what amount of water would have prevented this from happening by the time the fire department got here. So with that, we can open it up to questions.
Mayor, do you know if the current owner had fire insurance?
I do not.
Kenwood Commons is owned by Jacob Friedman. Have you been in touch with him as to, does he still own it? Is it under different ownership? What's the status?
I have not been in touch with him. My understanding is that there was a bankruptcy hearing on the 20th of March, so on Monday, and that there was a bid made for this building in a bankruptcy auction on Tuesday.
So he still owns it, though?
I don't know the legal status. My understanding is that the bankruptcy proceeding was allowed to go forward. Determination was made on Monday, and that on Tuesday there was an auction. So I don't know the legal status of what happens with that, but that this building and property was auctioned in that bankruptcy.
Is there anyone here who knows the status? Dan, do you know?
You would need to check the court records. I've just told you the status.
Mayor, what's your understanding of the history of this building before Doane Stuart? before it moved in?
Well, I mean, there are people here who could speak to this far more eloquently than I could. But this is a building that a property that dates back to really the early 1800s. Initially there was a home that was built here as a summer home, as I understand it, and it is a property that was added to when it was purchased and the convent was created. The chapel inside this building was stunning. I walked this building when we thought we had a development plan for it. This was a priority building as far as wanting to get it into redevelopment, and there were a number of fits and starts, unfortunately, but this was, again, ultimately sold to Kenwood Commons LLC, and they did not follow through on their plans for redevelopment.
And a question for the chief. I remember a fire at the convent on Scotland Avenue near Manning. That was a large fire. This is a large fire. Can you put that into some sort of context? Do you recall fires larger in the city?
We've had several. Probably 5-6 years ago, we had the 2 blocks that burned in one night, so that was an extraordinary event. This was a massive fire. This is another extraordinary event that we faced. A great challenge to our fire department, but as you can see, 4 hours, they did a phenomenal job. So I can't give enough kudos out to our members. Fantastic.
Mayor, is there an estimate on what the demolition costs are going to be for this?
So we haven't determined what is going to need to be demolished, where that responsibility is going to lie. Clearly when we do a demolition, we have to do this in partnership with the county, because ultimately the liens that are placed on the property are turned over to the county. Once the hot spots are out, we'll have engineers come in. They'll make a determination as to what's going to happen next. We believe that the property was purchased, that there was a buyer at that bankruptcy auction. Whether they follow through with that bid now, given what has happened here, is unknown to us. So unfortunately, the ownership status and the bankruptcy will continue to provide challenges to us in getting this property unwound and hopefully into more secure hands.
If there was such an issue with some of the board ups, as Mr. LaJoy had mentioned, I think he said the last time it was August. Why wasn't there why didn't that happen again between then and now?
So we were here as recently as December, doing an additional board up. It was in August that we came and cleared this line of sight. I mean, had this not been done, I don't know what what would have happened. It would have been very difficult for our fire crews to get to this building. Would have provided some pretty significant challenges for them.
At that time, how concerned were you, even in December, or warned about maybe this happening internally inside the building, not just the brush on the outside?
Well,
something that was brought to your attention or concerned about at that time?
Yeah, I'll let the director talk about that.
So we were very concerned, which is why we cited the owner again for that engineer's report and to remove all the debris and garbage that was not only inside the property but outside the property, because we had clear forethought that if there was ever an issue here, this was going to make it very difficult for anybody to deal with a problem, whether it was a fire or just a collapse from the water infiltration. The first board up we did, we boarded up over 100 windows and doors. It was just astronomical. When we did the second board up this last time, we left it to the first floor only in the hopes that our court cases would proceed to a point where the owner would actually do something, but at the same time prevent people from getting in. When we came back in December, it was a door that we had to secure, and there was no further openings at ground level that we were able to identify and have to secure. So, we did everything we could legally to push that forward, but there was nothing else we could do at that point as it relates to boarding up any further.
Was there ever any consideration of the city or the county taking over ownership of it?
So the city would have no grounds for taking over the ownership of this building.
Like I was saying earlier, we started to look at that procedure, but when they filed bankruptcy, it's the similar case with the central warehouse. Kind of puts us on the outside and have to figure out a different game plan.
we'll assume there was no electricity running into the building last night when the fire broke out?
That's correct. The gas and electric was all off.
Mayor, can you talk about how frustrating it must be that the city has these old buildings, these large redevelopment projects, and they keep having setbacks like this?
Well, I think we've had great success in a number of redevelopment projects. I mean, when you look at what has happened along Pearl Street, when you look at the reuse of the former high school, when you look at what's happening with Albany, redoing another former high school, we've had some great successes, and we're thrilled that we are now starting to see some success with respect to the central warehouse. This building was a little bit different in that at the time that Kenwood Commons LLC took over the ownership of this building, it was in pretty good shape. This was not the heavy lift that we see in some of the buildings and properties that we have in the city. This was a project that should have been able to be done and should have been relatively straightforward. We always want for these types of projects to utilize all of the various funding sources that are available. And so, whether it's ESD grants through the state, historic tax credits. There was one developer who was interested in this property, but they didn't want to use the historic tax credits. They wanted a very heavy pilot from the city as opposed to using the historic tax credits. And we wanted to put this into, the hands of somebody who was going to restore it and keep some of those historic elements to this building. So there are lots of resources that were available for this building. We thought that the numbers worked with respect to doing a conversion here, a mixed-use conversion, and that this developer did not follow through on that and was not able to get that done. But this was probably some of the lower-hanging fruit at the time that it was transferred in 2017, and unfortunately, it is not today. And that's not, that's notwithstanding our attempts to get this guy into codes court. But once he declared bankruptcy, it again, it then creates a much longer process for the county to be able to get their hands on this building. But I have no doubt that, given where the bankruptcy proceeding was, the next steps would have been either working with this investment firm that was interested in purchasing it, or working with the county to do exactly what we did with respect to the cold storage building, which was have the county foreclose on it. Let's get control of this, and then let's get it into redevelopment hands.
When you talk about the historic tax credit deal, was that the deal that Sonny Bonacho was pursuing with the city?
That was the one that he was looking at. Yes.
In hindsight, do you think that would have been better off to have gone with that deal rather than wind up with?
I can't operate in hindsight. It was 2016. It was a long time ago, different time. And again, this is a tragedy that nobody wanted to see.
Talking about moving forward with some of these things and abandoned buildings and or preserving properties like this, does this change at all the process in which you go through? As you mentioned the process here in the past, how about moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think that we have. I mean, we have moved on a number of properties. And the other challenge that we have with a number of historic properties is that they're not in bankruptcy. And they're not delinquent in taxes. So, every property is its own story. If it were simple and straightforward, they'd all be done. But we are moving forward with a number of projects that are happening, throughout the city with respect to redevelopment in Arbor Hill and West Hill and the South End. We've seen, a huge investment along Clinton Avenue that preserved and saved, a number of buildings that were, really in very, very, very difficult shape. So we continue to work together with the county and partner with developers to ensure that we're helping to save these buildings.
Are there any signs that this is a suspicious fire?
This is very early into our investigation. Again, being the lead agency, we're working with our partners. So it's just, we have to analyze all our any information.
You didn't find any gasoline or anything?
We're not going to speak to that.
Very early
We're not going to speak to that.
Can you
clarify what we're looking at here? This is what was Kenwood Convent? Is that what you're looking at here? But then, is that part of what was Doane Stuart?
Yes.
So is that building damaged as well? Is there anything salvageable at this point?
We're going to be doing we'll be going through with our engineers, and they'll be making that determination. So, I mean, sadly and tragically, the building that burned was the historic part of this property. There had been a newer addition that was put on to the school, but we lost a treasure here, and it's it is challenging. It's frustrating. We've all gotten emotional about this because this was a beautiful, beautiful building.
Thank you, everyone.
Chief, I didn't know you had any.
All right, Dan. Good job, man.
How are you?
That's all I wanted to.